Welcome everyone. Apologize for the technical difficulties. Let me start quickly again by welcoming you to this event to mark the launch of the INFORM Severity Index. My name is Andy Thau. I work for UN OCHA and I'm the coordinator of INFORM. Purpose of this event is to introduce you to the Severity Index. The objective of the index is to contribute to better responses to humanitarian crises by providing decision makers with a consistent, reliable and global summary of information about their severity. We hope to give you an introduction to the rationale behind creating the index, as well as show you how it works and how you can use it. We're very fortunate to be joined today by some presenters whose organizations have contributed hugely to the development of the Severity Index. Let me quickly run you through the agenda for the event, which will last for 1 hour. Firstly, Ilka Salmi, who is the Director of Disaster Preparedness and Prevention from DG ECHO of the European Commission, will give us some insights into the importance of evidence-based decision-making in humanitarian assistance. ECHO has been a long-time supporter, driver and user of INFORM. Secondly, Dan Chirondojan, the Director of Space, Security and Migration from the Joint Research Centre of the European Commission, will tell us more about how we can make sure that this evidence is scientifically credible. The JRC, of course, is the technical lead of INFORM and is responsible for the methodology of the index. Then Agaliki Nika, who is a senior analyst from ACAPS, will talk us through the Severity Index itself, how it works, how to interpret it, and how we can use it. ACAPS has been a key partner in developing the index and is responsible for collecting and analysing all the data that it uses. Lastly, Cecilia Utas, team lead for early warning analysis from the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, will give us a more detailed example of how the index can be used. FCDO again has been a long-term supporter and contributor to INFORM. You have the opportunity to ask questions or make comments using the event Q&A function. After all the presentations have concluded, we will return to each of the presenters in turn to allow them to respond to any questions and make some final comments. Before we go to the presentations, I would like to give you a very quick overview of the INFORM initiative. INFORM is a multi-stakeholder forum for developing shared quantitative analysis relevant to crises and disasters. What we're trying to do is develop a common evidence base to help decision makers. INFORM includes organizations from across the multilateral system, as well as donors and technical partners. The Joint Research Centre of the European Commission, as I mentioned, is the scientific and technical lead for INFORM. JRC is responsible for the methodology of the Severity Index, and ACAPS is responsible for the data collection and analysis. OCHA is the overall coordinator of INFORM. INFORM is developing a suite of quantitative analytical products. These are designed to support decision making at different stages of the crisis management cycle. The INFORM Risk Index is focused on analysing structural risks and supports prevention and preparedness. The Severity Index is focused on understanding the severity of existing crises and supports mainly response. And lastly, INFORM Warning, which is in development, will monitor early warning signals to support preparedness and early action. So INFORM works by collaborating firstly to understand the analytical needs of partners, to come up together with solutions, and then working through an iterative development process guided by our technical partners. We try to mix users, decision makers, and technical specialists as much as possible. And the resulting INFORM product is really a piece of analysis with the underlying data that can be applied in different ways and by anyone to help them make better decisions. There are 4 principles which guide all the work that we do in INFORM. All countries and crises in the world are included in the analysis that we do. All INFORM products are freely available, and the methodology and sources are open and transparent. We try to use the best available methods and data, and we're committed to make the products available into the future. And lastly, the products are made so that they're easily adapted, so they can be included into different decision-making processes. We don't dictate how to use the resources. Now we'll turn to the presentations. Firstly, Ilkka Salmi, Director of Disaster Preparedness and Prevention from DG ECHO of the European Commission. Ilkka will talk to us about how important strengthening the evidence base for decision making is for ECHO. So welcome, Ilkka, and over to you.
Andy, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. It's indeed my pleasure to have this opportunity to be present here at the launch event of the INFORM Severity Index. I would say that this is a big day for DG ECHO and JRC, and I would also like to extend my warmest congratulations to JRC and ACAPS for this major achievement. DG ECHO is fully committed to the strengthening of our evidence base and the methodologies for our policy decisions. A key part of our mandate is to improve decision-making processes, and especially in this era of big data, I would say that it's even ever more important to have and essential to have a capacity to do that. DG ECHO has been supporting the INFORM since its beginning in 2012, and I'm very pleased to see the significant steps that have been taken since and the continuous improvements made. Our strong interest is in INFORM's new Severity Index. Certainly not only in that, we also look very much into the INFORM Risk Index and other related tools. But anyway, as the Severity Index comes from our commitment to take informed decisions based on robust, scientific and transparent methodologies. As many of you have certainly seen, all the way from the Commission's President von der Leyen's statements, it's very crucial that the European Commission's decisions are always based on trustful evidence, and we are certainly following that line in our work. Again, the Commission's humanitarian aid action is based on the principle of impartiality, meaning that humanitarian aid must be provided exclusively on the basis of need without discrimination. Tools such as the INFORM Severity Index will certainly help us to reach this objective. From now on, it will play a key role in our process to allocate humanitarian funds. It's of course very clear to all of us that we can't really only base on our decisions exclusively on numbers. At our headquarters in Brussels and also in our field offices, we do benefit from a large number of in-house experts who follow the evolution of a crisis on the ground. Their expertise is crucial in refining our decisions on the allocation of funds and other policy developments. It is needless to say that the ongoing COVID-19 crisis affects us all profoundly. It makes difficulties even worse for the already fragile countries on a health and economic level, and they will see their already difficult living conditions worsening as a result of this pandemic. The scarcity of financial resources combined with increased needs makes it more important to carefully assess how the funds available can be sent towards those that need most support. INFORM's new Severity Index offers to all donors a common basis for analyzing a crisis. All crises are represented in a coherent and standardized way in this model. Not only does this support our objective of impartiality, but it also represents a common ground for needs assessments by all donors. It is therefore a first step to a more coordinated approach of the funding allocation process. In line with the grand bargain commitments, we support capacity building initiatives for the humanitarian community to conduct needs assessments. If donors would use the INFORM Severity and other INFORM tools, they have a guarantee, and we have a guarantee, that we all have a common analysis based on these tools and as well as the common data sources. So thank you very much for this initiative, and as I mentioned, this will be very high on our agenda in the upcoming negotiations, internal negotiations within DG ECHO, how we do our fund allocation when it comes to the humanitarian aid. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Salmi. It's very good to hear how important this is for you. So I believe we need to make a slight reshuffle. So Angeliki, Nika from ACAPS, if you don't mind, I will come to you next. This is really where we get to see some more detail about the index itself. And Angeliki is going to show us how it works and how we can use it. So Angeliki, over to you.
Hello everyone. My name is Angeliki Nika. I'm a senior analyst with ACAPS, and I'm very happy that you joined us today at this launch event. It's a very happy moment for both the ACAPS, JRC, and INFORM colleagues in general, as this is the moment we present the results of a long process of and the long years of work on the Severity Index. I'm going to go through the INFORM Severity Index with you, looking at the model itself, but also at the results that we can share with you today. So the INFORM Severity Index aims to provide an improved way to analyze the severity of humanitarian crises at the global level. It is a sensitive, regularly updated and easily interpreted model for measuring crisis severity. And the main advantage is that it allows the measurement of severity against an objective, common scale that can be applied to all crises at all countries of the world. The index itself is a composite indicator that summarizes a wide range of already existing information about crisis severity and presents it in a format that can be used easily for decision making. What we do is that we collect crisis level data and use it to populate an analytical framework. The indicators then are aggregated to provide comparable severity values for all crises. I will talk later more specifically about how the data collection is done, and also we will take a better look at the analytical framework itself. The index has been in development together with INFORM partners and other experts since 2016. And a beta version with the main results has been published monthly since early 2019, so for about 1.5 years now. Our main objectives with the INFORM Severity Index is, of course, to measure the severity of humanitarian crisis globally on a regular basis. And what more specifically we tend to do is to lead a shared and objective understanding of crisis severity, to justify and advocate for action, especially in the case of forgotten or crises that are not commonly recognized, to contribute to decisions on the allocation of funding and resources in the humanitarian sector in a way that is proportionate with crisis severity, and also to increase the analytical capacity around crisis severity and monitor trends over time. Here you can take a quick look at the analytical framework of the INFORM Severity Index. the term of analytical framework itself describes a constructed conceptual idea of the severity. This is constructed through an iterative process together with informed partners and other experts. We went through conversations about definition of terms, selecting the different components of the index, and building and identifying the different indicators. Of course, please keep in mind that any analytical framework is a simplified and subjective view of reality and not an accurate representation of it. As you see here, the analytical framework has a hierarchical structure. At the highest level, we see the description of the overall severity of humanitarian crisis at a specific point in time. At the next level, we see the three main dimensions of the INFORM Severity Index, the impact of the crisis, which looks into the geographical and human effects, the conditions of the people affected, that looks into the people in need, and also the concentrations of the conditions of people living in the affected area. And then the last pillar looks into the complexity of the crisis, and includes factors of mitigation or resolution of the effects of a crisis. Now, its dimension is further broken into categories and indicators, which are chosen to capture the concept of each dimension. We can move to the next slide. So here we take a look at a more closer look at the second pillar of the model. This is the part of the model that personally I find the most interesting, and also it's the most significant in terms of the contribution to the final scores of the model. At the core of the INFORM Severity Index is a process of mapping different reported severity categorization to one common 5-level scale that allows the use of additional information to make judgments about the distribution of severity in an affected population. The biggest challenge with this part of the model is that information about the conditions of people affected is not consistently or systematically available throughout the different crises. Now, as you see here, the way that we categorize and organize this pillar of the model is that all people living in the crisis-affected areas are included at level 1 or higher. All people affected by the crisis are included at level 2 or higher, and people with identified humanitarian needs are included in level 3 and higher, depending on the severity of the reported needs. The approach that we take is to bring together the best information currently available about severity in a way that is comparable across different crises. The ACAPS analysts working in the model review a wide variety of sources on a daily basis to identify what the best source for each crisis is for this part of the model. Now, the quality of the index relies, of course, on the quality of the primary severity information and on the broader frameworks and processes for collecting it and reporting it. I think we can move to the next slide. So here we take a look at how the final score of the index is calculated. As I mentioned before, the model have these three dimensions that we see here: the impact, the conditions of people affected, and the complexity. And they are in the INFORM index in the mutual consequential relationship. What this means is that the impact of an event generates different conditions of people affected in a context that can make it more or less complex to provide assistance to them. This is presented in the formula in the following way, where we see the impact of the crisis times the conditions of affected people plus the complexity of the crisis. Now, a different weight is applied in those conditions. The overall severity, therefore, as we see, is more sensitive to the conditions of the people affected rather than the complexity. Now, the different dimension values are generated by aggregating the indicators of those components from the lowest to the highest severity of the analytical framework. The indicators that we include also have a relative and an absolute component. This is intended, why we chose to do that is because we consider important the relative size of a crisis in comparison to the size of the country, and also the number of people in need in comparison to the total number of people that are living in the affected area. We can move on. So the INFORM Severity Index itself aggregates information from a range of credible publicly available sources, such as UN agencies, government, and other multilateral organizations. We have in ACAPS there is a team of 9 humanitarian analysts that are going through the data collection on a regular basis, monitor daily the different sources that feed into the model, and the human analysts monitor the sources that identify the changes in the humanitarian situation, new data or new information about the humanitarian situation as they become available, contextual, economic, or political information that may affect the humanitarian situation, any uncertainty or ambiguity about an event or piece of information, and also significant information gaps. As I mentioned before, the sources that we use include a big variety of humanitarian agencies, governments, and other organizations. And we also put significant focus on the humanitarian needs overview when it is available for a crisis that we consider in the model. Now, the index is published monthly, and it represents a snapshot of the most up-to-date and reliable information that are available until this moment. I think we can move to the next slide. Now, let's take a look at what you get when you go into the results of the index. First of all, you will see that the information in the INFORM Severity Index is calculated, the final scores, and the information itself is organized at a crisis level. A country, that means practically that a country can be affected by multiple crises. Also, crises may be aggregated at regional level, and therefore we have regional crises. And the breakdown of crises is a result of how they are reported by operational organizations on the ground. Now, a single index value for each country that has an active humanitarian crisis is also provided separately. This combines all crisis data from all crises that affect this specific country. All the results are then provided on a 5-point scale, going from 0 until 5. 5 means the highest severity. And as you see here, we have also marked it with darker colors so that it can be easily identified. Apart from the 5-point scale that you see here, we also provide a level categorization from very low to very high. We actually recommend users to primarily use this categorization for decision making. Of course, then the final score supplements this categorization and provide further information, and the index itself provides further information about trends in a specific crisis and help us interpret the results. Now, if you want to see further information about each of the main dimensions that are included in and contributing to the final score, you can actually access all the different categories and all the different indicators. What we also think is very important is to provide the underlying data, the raw data that feed the index and create the calculations. And that's why we We provide all the information available that feeding those indicators, including the sources, a link to the source, the date of the source, and the analyst role notes that I think these are also very important to help the users interpret the results as they get a glimpse of what process the analyst followed to identify the specific information that go into this indicator. We can move to the next one. So as I mentioned before, the index is updated monthly and can be therefore used to monitor also trends in the severity of crisis globally. Here you will see an example of some of the trends that we have identified over the past year and a half of data from the INFORM Severity Index. Now, the trends provided are a comparison of the average of the latest 3 months and the average of the 3 months prior to those. So you don't see a value per month, but an average of the 3 months of the past 3 months always. There are some things that we need to be mindful and careful when we are looking into trends analysis, of course, using the INFORM Severity Index. Some of them is that a real change in the crisis situation that may be reflected in changes to one or more data sources. What that means is that what the change that you see may not always be a result of a change in the real situation on the ground, but a change on the data that are available around this crisis. Another type of source of this trend, it can be also an improved understanding of the crisis. So the situation on the ground may not change, but we have now better information available or better data that provide a clear interpretation of them, of the different crises. Of course, ideally, we also see an actual change in the situation. And here in the presentation, you can see some examples of how we think those different situations may be represented in the trend line of the INFORM Severity Index. What that means is that we need to take into account some different factors when we do the trends analysis. One is the significance. So a trend may not necessarily be significant, and you see in the first option here an example of that. We may see a sudden drop or a sudden increase in a crisis, but then the score returns into the regular levels. We see also a very important factor is the timing. So a change in a particular month does not necessarily present an event that took place in that month, but it may show the result of a few months back once the data actually become available. And then the cause of any change, we always need to consider why was this change happening in the model, and it can be done by examining the detailed results in the data, the notes of the analyst, the sources that feed into the different indicators. We can move to the next slide. So now I want to talk to you a bit about the user case, some examples of user cases of the severity index. We think that an improved and widely shared understanding of crisis severity can, of course, contribute to making better decisions, and that those better decisions will lead to better outcomes for affected people. But the primary advantage of this index is that it allows measurement of severity on a common scale across different crises in different countries. It can therefore be used to support decisions that require a broad understanding of the severity of crisis globally. For example, to determine strategic priorities, to understand if globally deployed assets are strategically aligned with crisis severity. What we don't think it can do is to make, of course, operational decisions for the response itself. As all crises are different with different levels and types of needs and different requirements for the response strategies. So we recommend using crisis-specific information for these decisions. We also think that the INFORM Severity Index can be combined very easily and should actually be combined with other type of information about humanitarian crises. Some examples is taking a look at risk, forward-looking analysis, early warning, capacity analysis, and also, of course, looking into field networks and expert knowledge of the specific humanitarian crisis. This index can also be used, of course, in combination with the other INFORM products. As Andrew mentioned at the beginning, this is the INFORM Risk Index and the INFORM Warning, which is currently under development. I will stop here. Thank you very much. And I'm happy to see if you have any questions about the index at the end.
Thank you very much, Agiliki. Great. And we'll see a more detailed example of the index in use shortly. But first, I would like to hand over to Dan Chirondojan. Dan, if you can hear me, I hope you can. Who is the Director of Space Security and Migration of the Joint Research Centre of the European Commission. And Dan is going to share with us some insights about the scientific process behind INFORM. So welcome, Dan, over to you.
Thank you, Andrew. I hope that you hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you fine. Thank you. Go ahead.
Sorry for this late intervention, but I had some challenges with technology in this COVID pandemic crisis where we cannot meet directly. So I know that Ilka is also present. I want to thank him for his time and for the very good collaboration. So I will change a little the point I wanted to say, because you already saw the tool. When I entered, I saw that a colleague explained how this works, and I think that what is the message that I want to say is that this tool is based on sound methodology developed by GRC together with the partners of INFORM, and we hope that this tool will be used to better understand the risks, but also to better quantify the humanitarian aid and funding. Yeah, so to make a better correlation between these, and in our view, so there are these two areas of the tool. So is the first is the index, INFORM Risk Index drivers, in such a way that to prevent and prepare what has become a multi-hazard risk assessment. And the second one is about the severity of the crisis, so about collecting information, how the crisis evolves and how severe is becoming. And what we know is that the humanitarian crises around the world become more and more severe, more complex and longer. So the average length of the humanitarian crisis has increased from 5 years in 2014 to more than 9 years in 2019. So there is a gap, and this trend will continue. This is why we need to manage this based on scientific evidence, and this is what the tool I think is bringing. And at the end of the day, we are trying with this tool to build more resilient world. Yeah. So if we are managing better the crisis, we will be able also to increase. And last but not least, I think that this partnership, this tool, is a great example of combination between science, policy makers, field experts, academia, and practitioners. And I think that this is a very good example of application of science in operations. And I think that this is, at the end of the day, very important. So I would like to thank UNOCA and ACAPS for such collaboration. I know that it was a very big effort. I know from my colleagues that were very intense in the last months. And I want to wish you all the best success in using this tool, and also I want to wish you to take care of your health in this very difficult pandemic crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan, and thanks very much for your well wishes. I'm sure they're appreciated by everyone. Okay, so next up, we're going to look at a much more detailed example of how this index can be used. And for that, I'm going to hand over to Cecilia Utas, who is the team lead for early warning and analysis from the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. So Cecilia, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. First, I would like to really extend a thank you to the INFORM partnership for all of the efforts in doing that, and obviously particular to Angeliki and the team in ACAPS that is providing this, not only even though it's launched today, but in the last at least 1.5 years, and we have been basically using it not maybe from day one, but for more than a year on a consistent basis in the work that we're doing as to informing decision making within FCDO. So we see here very much the reason why we're using INFORM Severity Index is that it's providing us a certain level of consistency, comparability, and also objectivity, which then will support our work as we are trying in the humanitarian work of FCDO to be more informed by sound, neutral, and timely information, where we have built up a humanitarian surveillance and risk monitoring system that is providing alerts, both sudden onset events, emerging risks, or deterioration of spikes in protracted crisis. I'm just checking if you can see my presentation at this point.
Yes, we can see it. Thank you. Okay,
perfect. So here you can see kind of the system that we're working in. For the sudden onset, we have a 24/7 duty system that is providing alerts then based on hazard-specific criteria. And then based on, obviously, the situation, we will then issue different type of advisories for that. But here as well, we have established a tool intervention criteria that is then fed by the INFORM, both the global risk index of indices, vulnerability, and lack of corporate capacity. But it's also using the INFORM Severity Index to understand the severity of if there is an ongoing situation, if any at that time. We also, for the emerging risks, we have then for early warning analysis and forecasting, we are using an established watch list with set criteria for alerting. And here as well, on a monthly basis, we are consolidating data where we are using INFORM Severity Index. Same here, using the data just as Angeliki was mentioning. For us, it's very useful and important that they are providing not only a classification, but also providing the underlying data sets that is feeding in, which is something that we then can utilize to make sure that there's a consistent approach to consolidating this data. So not only is, of course, it's a very labor-intensive process that ACAPS team is taking on, but also it's providing us with an objective consolidation before we then put it into our watch list. We are, of course, as well supplementing this with a number of other indicators as to coming up with our analysis of the situation. So based then on our alerts, internal alerts that we're getting out from the watch list, we are then doing our own analysis based on a mixed methods, quantitative data, qualitative data, and expert input. This is then all leading to establishing a risk classification where we again is utilizing both the INFORM Global Risk Index, but also the Severity Index that is supporting our assessment of a risk situation. And then as well, we also, in the presentation of the product, we also ensuring that we are including both the vulnerability, lack of coping capacity, and severity. So when we're talking about risk, you can actually then put it in relation to the current situation on the ground, or the sometimes earlier situation on the ground, the baseline, with actually the risk going forward. So that is also then included in all our products that we have. And as well, the INFORM Severity Index are also then feeding into our risk watch. That is then regular update of the change in the identified risk earlier. So basically, we have a risk watch for the latest active risk that is between 20 or 26 most of the time that we're following on a regular basis. So the outputs and products, risk briefs, a monthly humanitarian early warning note, and more in-depth scenarios are, of course, then as well feeding into the decision making for us in FCDO for decision for any actions, be it early action, preparedness activities, and also resource allocation. So basically here in support of decision making, further funding analysis is required. And here often we are breaking this down with the help of the Severity Index in some cases. So for example, in this example, as you can see, we are then looking at people in need figures together based on the different severity classifications as well in the GCSI or the Severity Index. And this is then help us to see and identify the outliers if you compare to the humanitarian funding overall, but particularly as well as UK funding that has been allocated earlier. We're also using it for a broader sense check of our portfolio and looking how our funding for countries by risk and severity compares to the distribution of appeal requests and funding. So then we can see, of course, if we are spending too much money in low risk or severity countries in that sense, and helping us to give us in a focus of our work going forward. And then again, we're also looking at resources as the staff, for example, allocations against the crisis complexity, which is a sub-index, as also Angelique was mentioning earlier, in the Severity Index. That is supporting us to make sure that we not only allocating resources in the right places, but also understanding the staffing based on the complexity of the crisis. So overall, as you can see on the first images, is that we are basically utilizing and feeding in the Severity Index in a number of places in our analysis. So it's not only using a final classification to support our decision making, but it's very much integrated part in our overall analysis of both sudden onset events, but as well, of course, risk monitoring and early warning. I will stop there.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. Great, it's very interesting. Okay, so now we have a chance. Thank you everyone for the presentations. We do have an opportunity now to allow you to respond to any questions and to make some final comments. So I'm going to come to each of you in turn, and I'll highlight one or two questions. We've been trying to monitor the chat. I'm afraid we probably won't get to every single question, but we'll do our best. So Ilka, for you, thank you very much for your comments. I just wondered, you mentioned that the Severity Index you felt could help reinforce the impartiality of humanitarian aid. Is that something maybe you could elaborate on? And second point, maybe you could address, would you have any comments about how you think donors could coordinate better around this kind of information, and how it might help them? Thanks.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you very much for that. Just to kick off with this impartiality issue, as we all know, certainly the main principle for any humanitarian aid policy anyway, and actually, you know, it always needs to be provided by the basis of need without any discrimination between or within any affected population. So I would truly believe that using these tools, the severity index or the risk index, will guarantee that all these countries will be handled the same way, and actually the analysis will be based on the information. But as I also mentioned in my earlier remarks, we will certainly also rely on the information that we receive from our experts in the field and also here at the headquarters. So it's a combination of let's say quantitative and qualitative analysis in that sense. And however, I mean, as I said, we truly believe that this is now based on a very solid scientific basis, which is an helpful starting point, and certainly gives us the way also to coordinate with other donors. As you said, we have constant dialogue with some of our key partners, and we have also been advertising and actually spreading the message that this is one of the tools that we use, and also promoting that it would be used by others so that we could base our let's say assessment more or less on the same facts. And then again, I think it needs to also the complementarity and sharing the experience with other donors. It's helpful, easier and more helpful when we have the same basis to do that work. So these negotiations go on. We had yesterday some talks with some of our donor partners and colleagues, and this was briefly also mentioned that we have the launch for the severity index today. So indeed, we try to do our part in that sense. Thanks.
Thank you very much for those. Angeliki, I wonder, maybe I can come to you next. I see that there's a lot of technical questions in the Q&A. We'll try as far as we can maybe to answer those in there. But I wonder, there's a couple of common themes. One seems to be around how quickly the information gets kind of from the field into the index. And a bit more about that process. And then related to that, I would like to know maybe what happens in the event of a new crisis. How does this event become reflected in the index?
Thank you, Andrew. Those are very good points. First of all, how fast? The answer is always, it depends, and depends on many different factors. The data that are used in the index, they're largely based on secondary information. And at the same time, we do use networks in the field and contacts with expert humanitarians in different contexts. Now, I would say in the best case scenario that we can consider two different elements. We need to consider the time that it takes for the different organizations to communicate their field assessments and to communicate the field information either in an informal way or officially through the publication of a report. And at the second part, we need to consider the time that it takes an analyst to process this information and include them in the model. I would say this process can take from a few days to a few weeks or even a few months if the data do not become available on time. So it's very hard to have a specific answer because it really varies from country to country and from crisis to crisis. And even from organization to organization. Apart from, of course, different field constraints that play into that, a very interesting example of that is a new humanitarian crisis that begins, even if it's an onset, if it's an onset disaster or a slow developing crisis. We've had over the past year and a half that we collect information, many examples of sudden onset disasters occurring. And we saw that, again, depending on the resources that went into the information analysis in the specific crisis, the data collection, the initial data collection and assessment, we were able to provide a final score in some cases within a week or two, and in some other cases it took us way longer. Why is that? Is that not all information for all indicators become available at the same time. But I would say on an average, we were able to start a new crisis within a month and publish the final results within a month of the beginning of the crisis.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, I suppose the points that you make, they just underline really also that we're really very dependent on those primary data collection processes to make the index work. So we need to keep on improving those. Yeah. Dan, if I might come to you just for a final comment. And one thing I wanted to see, and this was brought up by Ilka, was this idea of how, from the scientific perspective, we can support better the response to humanitarian crises, which are very chaotic by nature. I wonder if you had anything you might be able to add on that point.
Yes, many thanks, Andrew. Yes, I think that from the scientific point of view, obviously that the data, providing data and timely data is critical. Yeah, it's very important to manage the crisis. And in fact, what we are trying here in ISPRA, and we have a crisis management laboratory, we are trying to create some tools and to test them in such a way that we can provide these to practitioners that can make their life easier. But I would like also to mention, Andrew, also this from a different perspective. So crisis management, which this tool we hope that will make it easier to manage, the crisis, is a critical service. Crisis is become a critical service for the society. More and more crises. People citizens expect that the authorities are managing this crisis better and better in their interest. So what I would like to say that the crisis management can be, and the civil protection authorities can be a target from external, and this is the link with security and maybe defense, can be a target, because if you target the civil protection authority and make them not to function, of course that they cannot manage the crisis, and then this can be a problem for the society. But also the crisis can be a vector. So on top of the initial crisis, somebody can inject some disinformation, some manipulation to create even more problems for the society. So what I want to say with this, that crisis management becomes so important, not only from the humanitarian perspective, but also from the society as a whole, as a security and even defense, and even from strategic autonomy. So I think that this is why these tools bringing some support, scientific support to the crisis management are so important, because when the crisis starts, also there is a helicopter view. Somebody is trying to see if there are some dots that can be connected can be linked and say, yes, we need to manage this crisis, but by the way, look, that this is linked with something else that can create even a bigger problem. So we need to be aware. So I think that this is why it's very important that these tools are very well developed. And I thank again the partners for this. This is very important, but also to show the strategic value of the civil protection in the normal society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. Okay, we have only a couple of minutes left, but Cecilia, we'd like to come to you, if possible, just for a very short opportunity. There's a couple of points here which I thought maybe you would be able to address around kind of barriers for adoption of this index by other donors, and also mentioning, obviously, decision making has a political aspect as well. I wondered if you maybe had something to say about that.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, I think that is a really good point, and obviously something that is something that you kind of look at. But I do really believe that when it comes to more like political decisions compared to evidence-based or data-based decision making or informed decision making, obviously is something that we are working. We can see a shift that is ongoing, I would say, in the whole humanitarian world at this point in time. And I think the more you have a more robust methodology, better data, reliable evidence, then you will actually more or less ask people to come up with counter evidence to that. They have to justify why they're not, so to speak, going along with that analysis. And also that will improve the transparency for any decisions, because I think we will always be in a situation where political intentions might sometimes trump the evidence that they have in front of us. But at least it will have to drive accountability based on the evidence base.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. Okay, it's time to wrap up. Thank you very much to all of you for participating, and of course I'd also like to thank all of the presenters. We hope all of you will become users of this index, and also share it and other INFORM products with your colleagues. Especially I would like to thank all of the INFORM partner organizations who contributed to this, and especially JRC and ACAPS, who've done the bulk of the technical work. We really do rely on the collaboration of all of these different types of organizations to make this possible. Just in terms of further information, all of the results and also the methodology documents, and we will also share, of course, the recording of this presentation will be available on the INFORM website. The results are shared in several ways. So there's, of course, the INFORM website, the ACAPS website, and also on the Humanitarian Data Exchange. And there is an API available for retrieving the results. They're updated monthly. So with that, I will close the event. Thank you again for participating, and wish you all a good rest of the day. Thank you again.
Thank you also. Bye-bye.